favorites is Ghost of Mars by John Carpenter. That's one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. Of course, science fiction films appeared very early in the silent film era. So there you go. Of course, the initial attempts are only 1 to 2 minutes long and black and white. So they usually had a technological theme and were often intended to be kind of humorous. So, Le Voyage dans la Lune, created by Georges Méliès in 1902, is very much considered to be the first science fiction film. It drew upon Jules Verne and H.G. Wells in its depiction of a spacecraft being launched to the moon in a large cannon. So there you go. Its groundbreaking special effects for the time pioneered the way for future sci-fi films, and after its release became very popular. Jules Verne's classic 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was adapted, many, many times. So, but notably the 1916 film, one of the first feature-length science fiction films, and others such as Edison Studios' 1910 adaptation of Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, and the 1913 adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. These two demonstrated an early overlap between science fiction and the horror genre. In the 1920s, another success, of course, was The Lost World, based on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's book of the same. It was one of the earliest examples of stop-motion animation and introduced several now famous sci-fi concepts like monsters, dinosaurs, and hidden worlds. So, that's kind of how it got started. In the 30s and 40s, in the 30s, they were largely influenced by the event of sound and dialogue, and by the effects of the Great Depression. Audiences began to pursue films with more escapist themes, of course. After the failure of the big-budget film Just Imagine, studios were reluctant to finance the futuristic sets necessary for this type of film. The 1936 British film Things to Come by H.G. Wells projected the world 100 years into the future and forecasted the event of World War II. Of course, it was also a box office flop, and films with serious speculation and visual spectacle of the future would largely disappear until the 1950s. There's no show you like, Valerie? I love Stargate SG-1. That has to be one of my favorite shows, Stargate SG-1. I absolutely love that show. Another one was Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap was good. Scott Bakula. Oh, that was a good show. I like that show. That was pretty good. What was it? Land of the Lost. That was many, many years ago. I can't even remember the name of it. I kind of remember it. My mom watched it, so I'm not exactly sure. Land of the Lost, I think it was. You had Battlestar Galactica. You had there were a lot of sci-fi shows out there. The decade saw the rise of film serials, low-budget, quickly produced shorts depicting futuristic heroic adventures. Echoes of the style can still be seen in sci-fi and action films today. Some of the most popular of the era were the Flash Gordon films, the exploits of Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Remember that show? They had that show too. I like the original Battlestar Galactica. I thought that was really... My mom loved that show particularly. She loved Battlestar Galactica, the original with Lauren Green. So you had the exploits of Buck Rogers and others, and the quasi-science fiction Dick Tracy. They continued to use science fiction elements like space travel, high-tech gadgets, and plots for world domination, of course. Other elements of science fiction were carried into the burgeoning horror genre driven by massive success of Universal Studios, of course. and all about featured mad scientists, experiments gone wrong, and other monster movies such as Dr. X and Dr. Cyclops. Did you like Battlestar Galactica or any of those like that? The 40s saw also the development of patriotic superhero serials, the Superman short subjects, the science fiction genre, independent genre, kind of laid low and dormant throughout the war. The development of the atomic bomb increased interest in science as well as anxiety. The period also saw the beginning of the Cold War, and these led to major increase. None of them? Wow. Of sci-fi films being created throughout the 1950s and creating the golden age of science fiction. One of the earlier, most important films of the era was 1950's Destination Moon. It follows a nuclear-powered rocket ship carrying 4 men to the moon, against a background of competition against the Soviets, of course. The film was a commercial and artistic success, and it brought about more studio financing of sci-fi films. So, the producer of Destination Moon was notably George Pal, who also helped create When Worlds Collide, The Time Machine, War of the Worlds. The original Time Machine I thought was really good. War of the Worlds was good. These were all great movies. Did you like any of those movies? Okay. And the pseudo-documentary A Man's Space, Conquest of Space. The Worlds Collide, Time Machine, War of the Worlds, they won for each, won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. So there you go. Alien films saw a huge surge in popularity during the 1950s. Many featured political commentary being mixed with the concept of UFOs, which had become ingrained in the public after the Kenneth Arnold Roswell incidents, of course. 2 of the first were The Day the Earth Stood Still by Robert Wise and Howard Hawks, The Thing from Another World. Are you serious? Wow, these are classics. You guys see The Time Machine. That was an awesome movie. What were they called? I'll think of it. In The Time Machine, I'll let you know. So you also had The Day the Earth Stood Still, directed by Robert Wise and Howard Hawks, That Thing from Another World. There are contrasting views of First Contact. The former had a peaceful race of aliens urging humans to control their use of nuclear weapons. Thing from Another World stalked a crew in the Arctic, which, of course, became known as The Thing later on. And it also had the paranoid final words, "Watch the skies," at the end of that. The idea of alien invasions recurred with Don Siegel's 1956 film, of course, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, one of the best movies ever. It's acclaimed as a classic. So if you haven't seen any of these, you really need to see at least one of these. Another important UFO film, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, had special effects, of course, created by by the wonderful Ray Harryhausen. Voyages of Sinbad and such. He was just so awesome. Stop motion animation. The master of it. He had previously worked with King Kong animator Willis O'Brien. His work also appeared in films as 20 Miles to Earth, 1953's film The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and that film was based on a short story by Ray Bradbury. It featured the fictional Rhedosaurus, which is thawed out of the Arctic by atomic testing and begins to ravage a section of the United States. It was great. Like the 1930s, so these movies demonstrate it was a mix of horror and sci-fi genres. So, and it often mixed with anxiety of nuclear technology or the dangers of outer space, of course. Them. It came from Beneath the Sea. Tarantula. all featured oversized animals created by nuclear testing. It, The Terror from Beyond Space, The Blob, The Angry Red Planet, and Kronos featured alien monsters, and still others like The Fly, The Amazing Colossal Man, The Incredible Shrinking Man, focused on human mutation. I can't believe you've never seen any of these. The trend was not limited to the U.S. The most successful monster movies, of course, was Japan with the Godzilla movies. The title monster, of course, attacking Tokyo, gained immense popularity. It led to other films like Rodan and what was it, Godzilla versus Mothra and all these. They were awesome films. Poor Tokyo, they're always rebuilding there. You saw Tarantula. Okay, so you did see one. Excuse me. And the financial success of these films relied on studios drawing in, of course, the teenage audiences, like The Blob, of course. And they were often shown at the drive-in theaters in 3D. Used by movies like The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Many sci-fi films of the time were created with minuscule budgets, and the B movie came into play. Yeah, you must have. Yeah, Tarantula is one of them. Yeah. So there you go. You have seen them. So yay. The phrase B movie came to signify a genre film made with low production costs. This concept was exemplified in Studio Memo about the movie Them. And that stated, we want a picture with the same exploitation possibilities as we had in The Beast from 20,000 Phantoms. It won't be a class production, but it has all the ingredients of being successful. The idea of low-quality, low-cost films were taken to an extreme by directors such as Roger Corman, Coleman Francis, and Ed Wood, and the latter's Plan 9 from Outer Space has been hailed one of the worst films of all time, so there you go. And if you've never seen it, you would totally agree, believe me. In the second half of the decade, the success of the genre led to some studios attempting some serious films with larger budgets, including the coldly realistic depiction of post-nuclear war, such as On the Beach. Forbidden Planet was one. That was an interesting movie. A sci-fi reimagining of Shakespeare's The Tempest. The second film would influence the genre for years to come, and it included the first all-electronic music score, which introduced Robbie the Robot, and served as the inspiration for Gene Roddenberry. How about Star Trek? That's sci-fi. Did you like Star Trek? Robbie the Robot, and served as the inspiration for Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. Were you a Trekkie back then? Science fiction also saw the genre go internationally. In Britain, for example, there was a period of production with Hammer Films, adaptations of Nigel Neal's Quatermass series. The success of television versions impaired the company to commission a series of film adaptations. So there you go. The 60s, there weren't a lot of sci-fi films in the 60s, as more movies were aimed at children. Did you like Star Trek? Star Trek was one of the best. Anyway, there continued to be adaptations of the stories of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, including The Time Machine and First Men in the Moon. The second half of the 60s, a number of exceptional films appeared. First was Fahrenheit 451. Have you ever seen that? Yeah, there you go. That's sci-fi, huh? So, yes, you did. Did you ever see Fahrenheit 451? Chris, I know you've seen that and read it. I have, too. It was a social commentary on freedom of speech and government restriction. And that was a really good movie for its time. Fantastic Voyage, where the science fiction film boldly went where no man had gone before. When Raquel Welch, you remember Fantastic Voyage, Raquel Welch, they ventured inside a human body. That was interesting. In 1968, the extremely camp Barbarella paid homage to the sillier side of early science fiction.